You're syncing up and tuning in to the Lending Link podcast, powered by GDS Link, where the modern day lender can dive deeper into the future of data, decisioning, and credit risk solutions.
Welcome to the Lending Link, the podcast that connects you with the latest insights in the world of lending. I'm your guest host today, Matt Tepper, Vice President of Global Marketing here at GDS Link, filling in for our regular host, Rich Alterman. In today's special episode, we have the privilege of bringing together two exceptional guests who are experts in their fields. First, we have Carl Spilker, the Executive Vice President of Global Analytics and Advisory at GDS Link. Carl leads our team of talented data scientists who specialize in developing and deploying custom models, scorecards, and attribute sets as part of GDS Link's analytics offering, Modelica Pro. With extensive experience in senior leadership roles for prominent companies like EasyCorp, Provident Financial Group, and Experian ScoreX, Carl brings a wealth of global expertise to the table. He holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Memphis and a global EMBA from Trium, awarded jointly through NYU, the London School of Economics and Political Science, and the HEC Paris School of Management. Also joining us today is Matt Shubert, the Vice President of Predictive Analytics and Data Science at West Coast University. Matt's expertise lies in transforming data into advanced analytic solutions that drive growth, enhance student success, and improve operational excellence. With an impressive background that includes leadership positions at Experian, Union Bank, SAS Institute, and Wells Fargo, Matt has a proven track record in developing and implementing cutting-edge analytic products, including machine learning and artificial intelligence solutions. Matt holds an MBA and Master's of Science and Finance from Indiana University, as well as a Bachelor of Arts in Economics and Econometrics from University of San Diego. Welcome, Carl. Welcome, Matt. In today's episode, we're diving into the revolution AI is bringing to lending practices. From fraud detection to data-driven risk decisions, AI is reshaping the lending landscape, and financial institutions are embracing its potential to optimize their operations. But before we start, join me as we turn back the clock about 7 months ago to November 30th, 2022. The U.S. defeated Iran to advance to the knockout stage of the 2022 World Cup. The entire world was becoming familiar with a gentleman named Sam Bankman-Fried and his company FTX. And OpenAI, a 375-person organization out of Silicon Valley, launched a free preview of its new chatbot called ChatGPT. Now, you'd be hard-pressed to talk to anyone who has not heard or tried ChatGPT, and the ripple effect has already upended education, music, and company share prices. I think the term AI has fallen victim to becoming a bit of a marketing buzzword, so perhaps let's level set a bit. And I'll start with you, Matt. Maybe you can speak to really the true definition of AI and speak to the different types of AI that folks might be familiar with.
Yeah, I think we look at AI, it's such a wide range of applications and things we've seen over time. And obviously, ChatGPT really has made much more visibility to what people refer to as generative AI, and that almost replacing what some of the human minds may be able to do, but on a quantum scale versus what a single brain may be able to do on its own. And it's amazing, though, there's other sub-applications we've seen over time, and almost that blend from what we call predictive to machine learning to artificial intelligence, kind of that navigation through that journey to get to be replicating what the brain does, almost like the early dawn development of neural networks and how those have been applied over time and evolved and changed, and what that's turned into some of the more recent releases and improvements have been made. And obviously, a neural net's trying to copy some of what the brain's doing, but without having everything visible to everybody. And that's probably some of the fears, things that go on with an AI is it really, do we understand it? Do we know what it's going to do? Is it the machine's going to take us over? And it's not that far-fetched for people to think sometimes. Maybe it is the Terminator 2 with the red glowing eyes, but I think some of that's a little bit over fear just due to the lack of knowledge and acceptance of change and how these things are really embedded in our everyday life as well.
And Carl, maybe you might be able to glean a little bit. A lot of the advancement that we've seen in AI, I think it all kind of also ties a lot back to the type of code and data that AI ingests. That kind of plays a little bit of a big role, correct?
Really good point, Matt. And we've actually taken what ChatGPT does. It's a very sophisticated process. And for the lending side, it's really, really dumbed down. The benefits of leveraging AI are what are some of the mathematical components that are used inside of it? And we've been able to strip those out down to a lending piece. The other thing that's advanced in our industry is the amount of high velocity, huge amounts of transactional data And that is really where, if you kind of think about it, let's take out a tiny piece of the AI methodology and let's use it to help discern a better predictive model with high transactional data, which is very difficult to do with kind of traditional regression techniques. Not impossible, but much easier. And what we're finding is it's really starting to squeeze out really large values of benefits. And I'm sort of eager towards where we'll step into what happens if we let this tool go in a true AI sense of lending.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting if it can build attributes and features, and that you think about the transactional data. You really just taking a series of transactions over a certain period of time, and how do you turn that into some kind of insight and get that signal or sub signal within there? And it'd be amazing in the future if that time to develop, that time, that speed to getting to those insights could be augmented and supplemented with some of those, whether it's ChatGPT or whatever comes from a generative sense.
Exactly. You can kind of tease out the things, the nuances, and go down another layer and see some things that you don't see. It does find a few segments that provides additional lift. And from a lending perspective, regardless if you're super prime, subprime, it's able to tease out some incremental value there, which from a lending perspective puts money in your pocket and serves more customers in a positive.
Yeah, basis point, counts of improvement in basis points can make a massive difference in lending. And that's where you get those, I mentioned sub signals. And that's where you really can start capturing some of those. And you mentioned segmentation. And that's all segmentation to do is just trying to get better predictive lift from those different broke out segments. And some of the models I've dealt in my past in lending would have up to 13, 14 different segments. And each of those has its own amount of predictive signal. And what machine learning allows you to do is to get the maximum kind of a value out of that, whether it's XGB or neural nets or whatever applications being used. And I think the speed of development and getting there is probably the biggest hindrance. That's where some of these tools might be able to help with some of that in some ways. Almost quantum computing is its own layer, but that's really what's the beef and the meat compute that's behind this is really more of a quantum layer that, I say quantum, people don't understand the trillions of amplitude that occurs versus what we can do on a local machine.
Admittedly, as a child of the 90s, I vividly remember a bit of the groundswell of concern surrounding the early adoption of the internet. Many folks were skeptical and hesitant to plug in their credit card information online. However, over time, those worries subsided as the internet brought forth valuable benefits that have been integrated into our everyday lives. I think it's without saying we find ourselves in a similar scenario. You guys were kind of talking a little bit to some of the concerns kind of out there. So Matt, let's start with you. Why should we not fear AI? What reassurances do you think you can provide that might alleviate some of these concerns about this tech?
You mentioned the internet. Internet's a great example. ATM's another great example. I can think back to my grandparents' generation that was anti-ATM, refused to even have a debit card kind of thing because of that fear that the machine wasn't gonna give them the money they're asking for, like a teller inside would. And I think it's some of this is that building that trust piece and getting people comfortable with some of the change and seeing things are different. Obviously, I've heard with AI, a way to make it more trustworthy is to put a human face on it. Something we've done at West Coast University is we have a chatbot. And I'm not going to say the chatbot's the most amazing thing that was ever built, but it has very humanistic qualities, sounds human, looks human, it has facial change reactions and things. And if you could put something with the strength of maybe a ChatGPT or something with that type of power behind it, it can be that much more powerful. But you make it look safe, you make people feel safe, make them feel secure. So I think it's more of a fear of the unknown versus an actual, maybe justifiable fear in a sense. Now, who knows? And there's some folks out there, I saw some things he released in the last week where some of the folks involved with some of these more generative tools are saying, oh, we must fear, we must worry, we must get regulation around it. I kind of see that some of it's trust and then some of it's just really understand what it really consists of today. And it's probably not as intricate and advanced as what people think. I mean, it's ChatGPT, I hate to break it down, but there's a little bit of time I spent with it and some of my team has spent with it. It's not that different than what an index view of things are. It's just delivering it in a more concise, direct manner and makes it seem more humanistic. And you read the responses you get from it, it's not that different than what you would get from a humanized chatbot. A little more sophisticated, for sure. I don't want to downplay it at all, but there's making people feel safe with it. That's probably why people like it, right? Because it seems like you're almost talking to somebody where you're building a relationship with that person. And that's why it's what it's doing. I think there can be controls and limits and things in place that you can make sure it doesn't get out of. I guess it doesn't get out of control like people might be fearful it could.
Yeah, I think to your point, there's definitely a lot of fear of the unknown, fear of just kind of where this could potentially head. without necessarily really just kind of looking at what it is in the moment and maybe kind of seeing where some of the benefits might lie. So kind of building off that earlier analogy just surrounding the adoption of the internet, we've seen how embracing technology can bring forth a multitude of benefits. Obviously, digital-only businesses emerged after adoption of the internet. Communication possibilities obviously expanded exponentially. The sharing of information and resources all became more accessible than ever before. So I might pose to you, Carl, as we explore the potential of AI. It's essential to understand the value that it currently yields. So in your experience observations, you kind of were talking a little bit of being able to really kind of start understanding some of the nuance and some of the data that you're utilizing. What other sort of value do you feel like AI brings to the table? How do you kind of see it enhancing business operations, decision-making processes?
I'll kind of leverage off what Matt Shubert had mentioned. It's one part trust, but it's also one part replacing a task that you have done 100 times that you don't need to do 100 times again. So I kind of think of right now, it's really replacing things that we've already seen in the past that we know we're going to do again. Part of the modeling process is, it's going to review the trends we've seen in the past and try to help you replicate and rank order what you're going to do in the future in a positive way and give you the feedback. That's a piece that I look at as being a positive outcome from this. And so the word I'm kind of thinking of is we can do more lazier things or we can do more productive things, right? And this tool will replace a lot of the things we've done. And I truly think just in across the globe, people are going to replace it with really productive. It'll take away the nuance. And over time, it'll make us trust. Every model has a level of mistakes. Ideally, you would like to minimize that, which at the end of the day are no different than what humans make. And we'll begin to trust it, which kind of echoing back to what Matt said. It's find that level of trust with the right balance of positive and less of a mistake. So I'm seeing some things here that it's definitely driving incremental value. It's making life dramatically more efficient, but it will offer some things that just don't make sense. And that's a piece that just takes more data, more learning, and a deeper dive into the parameter space to glean out more detail.
You have a good example I can share with it from a lending actually model that I worked on a previous employer, where we were building out a predictive model basically say, okay, what's the likelihood of default within 12 months of origination of something? It could be any type of lending product. And it was fit around businesses. And it would, for example, it was scoring Google and some of those other ones extremely low, which you would go, okay, how can you score that business low? Well, it's because they just might not be the fastest payer. They may not pay their bills as quickly as somebody because they don't have to, kind of thing. They can wait 30 days or they have a 60-day clause in their contract because they're able to request that. Basically create those corner cases. And I think the same thing applies with AI in a sense where you have to identify what those corner cases are going to be and then try to put controls, limitations around it. I mean, bad actors are going to be hard to remove from the use of some of these tools, but if you can identify those corner cases, just like when you're trying to create those and put overlays, other controls in place to kind of offset that, to keep it able to be used in ways that maybe wasn't intended to be.
Yeah, in preparation for this recording, I was reading an article that kind of reminded me that, again, kind of going back to really the early adoption of the internet, that it was really kind of more folks really playing around with the technology that really led to the most, the greatest innovation. The fact that it started as a kid in a dorm room just trying to rate the attractiveness of co-eds led to, obviously, Facebook. Another guy wanted to just see if he could buy a book out of a bookstore across the country. And now we got Amazon. So I think there's certainly something to be said about that the malicious actors are going to maybe kind of get a little snuffed out, and that the true innovation is maybe yet to be seen, but it'll probably just come from really folks just kind of embracing this and really kind of playing around and seeing what's possible out of it. That said, Carl, you kind of started speaking to it, and Matt, I know you have some experience on this as well, so maybe I'll let you answer first, but what might be some of the best practices for organizations that are looking to deliver, build, deploy AI-driven models?
I think it's really making sure you can understand the problem you're trying to address, and that'll give you a lot more visibility to where you're trying to apply the tools and help you more quickly identify what those corner cases are before they create a adverse outcome type of thing. And that probably fits really well with lending in that aspect, that adverse outcomes could be either you're denying people who shouldn't be denied, or maybe you're approving people who shouldn't be approved, or letting fraudulent folks come through the process. And I think the better you understand your operational process and where it's going to apply, where it's going to fit, and then maybe some of those manual or less automated processes that may replace, It's going to give them a better sense of where they need to have the right controls in place, and then monitoring and visibility to early signs of either scenarios that are breaking different corner cases and able to identify those corner cases, or even where it might have a weak point of prediction. Because Carl mentioned rank order, directional kind of accuracy is great, but that doesn't really help when you're denying somebody who's trying to get credit to go fund their small business, to fund their child's education, to fund those type of things. I think better you have an understanding of where it applies and it's being fit into your operational process within your organization, the better chance you're going to have to make sure you have the right controls and things in place to make sure minimal adverse impact comes from the application.
I recall you sent over a note in preparation for today. I really like that sprinkler system analogy that you kind of tossed out. Can you maybe kind of walk our audience through that a little bit?
Yeah. I wonder if it was sprinkler time. I spent a lot of time on a sprinkler system. I moved into a house that had little 2-foot carve outs, about 4 foot long and 2 foot away from the house, with sprinkler heads on it that would squirt 5 or 10 feet. So either I'm spraying my house with a whole bunch of water, or I'm spraying my paver with a whole bunch of water next to it that doesn't need water. And I kind of inherited a mess. And as I was going through trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to convert these over. I'm going to put drip in. Well, I figured, hey, I'm going to convert all these things over and put drip in. And it's almost like an AI system or a machine learning system where you say, I'm going to come in and do this one thing. It's going to fix everything. But if I put a pressure reducer below my sprinkler valves, I'm going to have a problem on unequal pressure going to each of the 5 valves. So then ultimately I starting with heads, and I'm popping hoses, and I'm like, okay, reducer here, reducer there. Short-term fix, it worked well, but eventually I started realizing I'm getting too much water some places, not enough others. Started having valves going bad on the ones where I didn't have reducers, and I realized I just put a pressure reducer on the main line. And for me, it's a system where you have the controls in place, and you can control getting the right amount of water, not too much, not too little, right place. Easy way to judge it over time to see if your grass turns green. Well, you can do the same thing with when you're, say, making credit decisions as you're going through. You monitor, am I seeing my denials, my approvals going up or down? Am I seeing a population that maybe I used to originate and be able to get booked as a new loan or a new lending product, and then now I'm not seeing those come through? And it's having that right control set in place. When I mention operational process, that's what I mean. Wouldn't we like to just go set the timer in the garage and sprinkler system and everything, set it, forget it? It runs twice a day for 2 minutes a run on every cycle, and everything works perfect and looks green and lush. And if you just try to leave it like that, though, as your seasons change throughout the year and seasonality starts to take effect, I mean, you're going to be flooding your grass for no reason in the winter because you're getting lots of rain. So I think when I try to tie this back to AI and applications of these advanced techniques, you have to think about the entire system. And that's what I mean operational process flow is what's going on, what's the internal factors, external factors, macro factors, micro factors you have to take into account to make sure things are controlled and set in a way that they can ultimately turn into pretty flowers in the spring and green grass in the summer throughout the year as much as possible, and not worrying about anything being over or underwatered along the process. And I think when you look at AI, it's the same type of mechanism. You have to really understand where it's fitting and enough about what it's doing versus having to know every single thing it's doing internal. If you have eyes on something, you can keep it from doing things you maybe don't intend it to do. And that's obviously what can impact the business outcomes if you don't have the right controls in place.
Yeah, Carl, I know that one of the services that we offer here through our analytics offering is model monitoring, which I know can really help simplify the model governance side of things. Any other color kind of want to add on to some of the best practices for organizations?
I was thinking about the legacy models. You built them for stability. You're happy they weren't razor sharp. If they're razor sharp, they dulled very quickly. If they're sharp enough, they worked and they'd last for a long time. That's the way we kind of look. I think with the AI technology, you can actually create a razor sharp utensil to segment much deeper into the pool. So then you think about, what is my infrastructure? Can I execute on this very efficiently with AI technology? And that's where I believe our software can handle that. And then number 2 is how quickly can you adapt to the changes? Because the sharper things are, the more likely they're going to get frail and break down and need some retuning, rebuilding. And so our ability to kind of reshape the model via monitoring, say, hey, look, things are starting to drift. The universe that I'm bringing through the door is starting to change. How quickly can I adapt to it? Then more importantly, how quickly can I redeploy my new change into the environment? So I'd say we're in the early days where we're using supervised intervention to retune, redevelop. We're using a better platform to be more efficient to deploy and execute. And To me, that means in 2024, 2025, we can find out a model's drifting, shifting, retune, or rebuild or redeploy instead of months and they turn into days. It's going to be pretty clear that after a point in time, we just turn on the machine and it turns into a true AI. It's a moving, interactive model. It's learning and adjusting to the market to conditions, similar to the sprinkler analogy. It's going to start adjusting. And our ability to kind of step in as an overseer, which still requires some human intervention to make some modulating adjustments, will make that product significantly better. So from a lending perspective, there's a lot of regulatory and describe what's going on, give people feedback. That's going to start becoming very simple, uncovered, explainable. And we're really close within a couple, 2 to 5 years.
So I know that we've all heard the jokes about our phones or our smart TVs, seemingly listening to our conversations, displaying relevant ads, which obviously is an example of the presence of AI-fueled algorithms in our daily lives. Although I think you both can speak to the fact that AI's reach far extends just beyond just targeted advertising. So Carl, I might pose this to you. Where does AI exist in our everyday lives that might surprise us? Are there any lesser known applications or areas where AI is quietly working behind the scenes?
Yeah, I think it's going to be on pattern recognition using some of the natural language processing items that come from it. So when they start associating events in your life and you get presented with a solution, I think that's going to be a bit of the eye opener, right? It would not be so crazy as your tire being blown and the system tells you somebody's on its way, will be there in 5 minutes. Probably pretty darn close today. Whereas when I was growing up, you're lucky to put the car to the side, stick a sign on it, walk 5 miles to a gas station. Totally different. And even 5 years ago, you call AAA, somebody like that. Now it's going to actually see and understand that event and start those processes, which is kind of going back to my earlier event. It's going to take the processes that we've seen and have been repeated and make them efficient for us and take that trouble away. So I see a lot of that. So then I put it onto the lending platform. I have to consciously think, gosh, Matt is going to lend me money at 1% interest. Interesting. I'm going to invest in so-and-so stock for 10%. I'll easily arbitrage. You can see the future going, Carl puts 10,000 into this account and it finds its way to do that for you. It arbitrages those. That would be kind of really a cool future state. My daughter was complaining about insurance. When is insurance going to tell you that they've actually met the peak of being the most efficient driver ever and give you the savings until you reach out to them? It'd be nice to have somebody adjust to that.
Where you think about how like loan aggregators work, and what if when you're shopping, it could be a mortgage or new insurance, a great example too. And what if something could deliver to you? Like you get pushed offers to you now from individuals. What if somebody say, here's how you get the best deal. Hey, you're up for renewal. You're up for renewal. Some insurance companies are doing that too. They'll send you that, hey, you're up. Right? I think they'll kind of time when they think you're up for renewal and try to advertise to you. But what if somebody did it on your behalf and kind of said, okay, now here's the competitive, and almost negotiates for you in a way. Here's the offers this person getting for a comparable policy, who wants to give them the best offer, who's most interested in getting that new business type of thing. And like, I like to shop and barter and things like that for certain those annual expenses to try to get them as low as possible kind of thing. And I think it'd be great to have a tool to help me with that. And almost like one of the banks has a shopping assistant you can download on your browser that tells you if a product is cheaper somewhere else. So that's an example. That's really just AI at work in a way, going and doing that for you. I know you mentioned listening on phones, and I can always tell when my wife's shopping for something for baby clothes or something, and then I start getting strollers popping up in my recommendations from Amazon to go in there and make a purchase type of thing.
So shifting gears a little bit, Matt, I was hoping you might be able to kind of speak to how exactly AI is transforming the lending industry. Maybe what are some advantages financial institutions and borrowers can expect when utilizing AI, and specifically within lending operations? Are there specific improvements or efficiencies that stand out?
Yeah, I think some are have been doing it for a few years, or a handful of years, to improve the document collection process, the underwriting processes. Some of those things are very manual, where you might have to spend different trips to a bank or different trips to make that happen. A lot of it's kind of a more electronic approach. I think there's still some opportunity there, but there's also all the back office efforts that are happening in your whether it's the origination of the loan, collections, all those kind of things are involved, and getting them quicker to decision. I think you're seeing a lot of banks going, and it actually fits the fair lending requirements, I think, a little bit better by using a predictive model that you can explain and have accepted by your internal, external regulators, and being able to say this model is being used instead of things where they like, oh, well, this person's a lawyer, let's give them a great loan. Okay, because we know they got job stability. As that change over time, 30 years ago, that was probably pretty common. I remember one of the methods I was taught back when I first got into credit risk. The director of credit risk I worked for said, one thing you'll learn above all else is case, creditability, stability, and equity. If you understand case, you understand how to write credit risk policy. And it was interesting because I moved from that, and then I moved into the modeling team, and I said, well, gosh, how do you capture case into a predictive model? Because it's how do you get more of the beyond just the credit components to get into the ability, stability, equity pieces? How do you get those data elements? And I think that's where the more advanced techniques can help augment some of that and make it a little bit more predictive. That's all an XGB approach is doing, is basically taking that gradient descent and going from a 2D view, almost like a 3D view of prediction, and letting you get splices amongst those 3D angles versus looking just a 2D angle of it. And then if you segment, you can get segments of those different 3D splices or dices that are happening. And to get to that sharp razor's edge, like Carl mentioned earlier, that knife is just your XGB, and those things just give me another tool to get deeper and more precise, almost like a surgeon does when they're performing a really intricate brain surgery to remove an aneurysm. And that's where some of these tools, I think, will change the way lending is approached and probably make it more inclusive, more equitable, be able to make sure those folks are getting credit that deserve credit across some of the maybe more marginalized groups as well, because a lot of those are probably going to turn into approvals rather than denials by having these other layers of angle and consideration versus somebody back 34 years ago. You go into the bank branch and talk to a loan officer and, hey, your loan app, great. Okay, great. You're making this, you got this type of job. Looks like you paid your bills before, approved, open for bias, versus if the machine actually likely has less bias than the human, because that human might not just be looking at the application. They might be looking at the person. They might be looking at the way they're dressed, the type of car they drove in that day, all kinds of other factors. The machine isn't going to look at those things. The machine's going to say, did you pay your bills on time? Looks like you have an acceptable income. Looks like you have steady employment. Looks like you're doing all these things right, and take out a lot of that bias that might be inherently tossed in by a human. So I think people fear AI, but AI might make things more fair for the average folks out there as well.
Yeah, and implementing AI in any industry is going to come with its own set of hurdles. Carl, when it comes to lending, what are some of the challenges that arise when incorporating AI into decision-making processes, risk assessments, fraud detection? How do we navigate these potential obstacles while maximizing the potential of AI?
The first couple are regulatory. And I think, frankly, we could probably have a podcast by itself, but that's clearly an area you want to be open and concerned to. The other one is explainability. People need to be told why. Why was this event occurring so they can rectify it if something's unusual? And that's probably one of the bigger challenges, because given the sophistication, the deeper layers you go, it can be kind of an unusual reason why you were denied, or also unusual why you were approved on the inclusivity side. That's going to be one of the things that will start bubbling. Two is going to be the movement. In the old days, a FICO score could stick with you at the same range for 8, right? And now your score can actually move quite a bit over time. And that's part of the plus, but that also turns into a bit of the negative on the predictive utility of these type of things. Just basically to summarize, Matt, the ability to explain, I think, is going to be the big one. And it's explaining from a regulatory standpoint, but it's also explaining from a business standpoint. Lending is going to ask a lot of people to drop hundreds of millions of dollars into something. They're going to want a good explanation and a good track record of history. I think we're at a point leveraging AI, traditionally leveraging AI methodologies, has been in place for 10 years. It's not old tech from a lending perspective. It's old tech because nothing's truly AI where it's alive and executing in real time. But I believe, as I mentioned earlier, we're within a couple of years that learning engine's going to be let loose. And the minute you can explain why, I believe it's going to make that Pandora's box open a bit.
You kind of touched on something that was kind of leading to my next question in terms of now, if we're able to get a little bit more transparency into credit scoring, what sort of specific techniques and methodologies do you think AI brings to the table that can lead to more accurate and insightful credit scoring?
Two things: opening up the parameter space of which it's selecting deeper insights into consumers' behavior historically. The second one is the market is adding more variables into that consumer lending decision. And it's adding huge amount of transactional type of detail. I'll pick one: open banking, for example. We've taken credit data, it's someone's file that's reported by loads of other institutions, then augmented with your daily transactional banking behavior, cash in, cash out, stuff of that nature. The benefits of these new techniques is it's able to tease out and combine those features to drive better insights. That comment in a very broad way opens things up in an inclusive way. It opens things up in a better predictive way. Gives people more, it gives some less, but it gives the lender, the guy who's investing in that outcome, a much better tool.
Obviously, fraud detection and prevention are crucial components of the lending industry. Matt, how does AI contribute to these areas, particularly in detecting, mitigating fraudulent activities? Likewise, if you could provide us any sort of real world examples you've kind of seen on successful implementations of that arena. Would be curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I work with lending and lending fraud solutions for probably, well, off and on 6, 7 years now. And fraud's a very unique use case. And what you're trying to do is really minimize minimal impact to your good population and capture as much of your bad population in a really small percentage. And you probably can look into a cost benefit to say, okay, if 50% of this 1% of my overall population is going to be fraudulent, that's an easy decision, right? 1 out of every 2 is going to be a fraudster. So you're not causing that much pain for the rest of them. You get at the 80 or 90% of a 1% or 2% population to say these people just get either completely rejected or maybe they get quarantined for a manual review to try and wean out some of the true fraudsters, false positives, just true positives kind of thing, to wean some of those out. And it's be able to isolate that. What more advanced techniques allow you to do? It lets you take in a lot more factors and elements. And the problem with some traditional the predictive modeling techniques is you're limited on the number of variables just because there's some rules you have to follow, and you can't break those rules, or those simplest more approaches won't work. So that's the nice thing with like say more advanced method in machine learning, neural nets, XGB, whichever you choose to use, or vector machines. Looking at these different angles, you can put a lot more. You can apply segmentation on those. You can make them explainable in a lot of ways. Even fraud, you still have to be able to explain like why this person's being denied. You don't want to tell the fraudster you're being denied because you're a fraudster. now they know they've been caught, so they need to make their profile look different next time they come through to not be classified as a fraudster. So the worst thing you do is tell fraudster they're a fraudster. It's more to say, oh no, you're just declined and here's some reasons why. And there's a reason in the profile, and it makes it a little bit harder for them to create that profile that sneaks through outside of that 1 or 2% population. So I think summarize, it's really just getting that more, you're going to have a more accurate capture of those fraudulent populations and probably be able to give them less targeted reason why they're being denied, so they can't try to sneak back through the door another way. Because a fraudster will keep attempting to come find that break, that open window, that open door, that open process they can sneak through and then get through what they want to do. Because once they're in, it's really tough to capture them. Once they're in, they look like everybody else, and they're dressed the same, they look the same, they talk the same. So you got to catch them before they get inside the house or inside the lending institution, I guess, for origination and funding and all those kind of things. So it's having that kind of capture, that improvement in accuracy, as well as the generic approach to how you're explaining why they are maybe not getting the approval they're expecting. I think scares the fraudsters when they got to talk to a human being. So the more you force those into manual review, you can almost use that accuracy to allow you to force more of them to be kind of flagged and say, maybe this isn't the bank I'm going to pick on. I'm going to go pick up the one who doesn't have a manual review process in place. It comes back to controls and put some of the controls in to make sure you minimize your false positives and maximize your true positives.
Matt, I'll stay with you on this one. As you were kind of walking through that scenario, it kind of seems that obviously fraud mitigation and financial inclusion are a little bit of the yin and the yang. You're kind of walking a little bit of a fine line between the two. So while you're obviously putting in methodologies and processes to kind of catch these bad actors, How is AI kind of working on the other side of the coin? How is it helping contribute to the expansion of the access to credit and promoting financial inclusion?
I think it lets you separate those true fraudsters from false fraudsters. Is a kind of easy way of putting it. Because you're gonna have the ability to see more, work with more, and especially if they can find a way to make generative AI almost think like an underwriter. I don't know that it exists today. Maybe some of the banks are working towards that. I know some of the large banks have announced they're building their own generative tools, and there may be a way to build that with these more advanced techniques. It really comes down to compute. And one thing it enables is having access and ease of access to quantum compute, to mass stores of data. The more signals and elements you can use to make your predictions, the more valuable you're going to have to be able to kind of separate the true goods from the true bads and those type of scenarios. And it does become more inclusive because then you're not denying, you're not having that false denial that they should have been approved, but they looked a little bit like they were a potential fraudster coming through the process. It ties back to accuracy, like I mentioned. If you can go from a 50% capture in a 1% population to an 80% capture, that's a huge difference. You're talking four bads or four true fraudsters to every one false fraudster type of thing. And I think it ties back in to be able to make those better for the overall group and more inclusive, as you mentioned, to give people an opportunity and not have them quarantined off in a group. Maybe they shouldn't have been quarantined off in the first place.
Maybe our last financial related, kind of getting a little granular here. Carl, loan portfolio management, predictive analytics obviously play a vital role in shaping lending strategies for any organization. Considering the impact of AI, how does it transform this approach as it pertains to loan portfolio management and predictive analytics?
Everything we've encapsulated here is ripe for benefit on the loan portfolio, the account management side. It ends up being how easily can your platform consume more, if not frequent, vast amounts of data? And then how does your analytics, your AI infrastructure read and consume that to create a predictive, positive, negative, moderate outcome? And fraud is kind of left a little bit the first time I've seen you. They're happy to be the first time and get in there for a little bit of time and then end up later on. So I think this tool is still very immature in the account management, portfolio management side of the world, but I actually believe the tool is right. Clients and their own transactional payment, call center, collections history it's got so much information, which is ideal for this space. I think finding a way to monetize that for benefit, and then also to kind of weed out a lot of this later stage fraud activity, later stage bad faith, identify poor transactional decline of some of the borrowers or positive transactional improvement is kind of that sweet spot.
And last one for you guys. I don't want to let your imagination run wild here. What theoretical innovations do you now envision AI bringing to fruition within lending and finance? For example, I read an article speculating that AI could bring revolutionary change to the world of medical care, take advantage of some of the existing biomedical technology that's already been adapted. So instead of typing your symptoms into a search engine and getting every prognosis between you'll be fine in an hour to head to the hospital immediately, AI can now deliver a little more personalized diagnosis, leading to advancements in not only care, but also just major efficiencies. Do you envision a similar path in finance and lending where AI expands upon concepts like open banking, alternative data? Carl, your example earlier of maybe the deposit now kind of AI now routes it according to your spending habits. Do you see some like that taking hold, and anything else that you've kind of been noodling around with?
Exactly that. Something a little more prescriptive. We started this conversation a couple weeks ago. I was thinking what I call the inefficient money that sits in my account that I haven't made a decision yet. And it may not be huge amounts, but over 10 years, it can be significant. And if I could have just had a marginal player allocating it with some relatively positive cash flow, that would have benefited me and obviously the market. So that's one area. I think of all the simple things like recipes and cooking dinner. God, that'd be beautiful to say, hey, dude, how do I make blah? And it gives you a little more precise activity. Or I need to get to point A to point B. I start and something happens, how can I make that more efficient? Or it's something proactive. By the way, I don't think I could find my way to the grocery store now without Google Maps, right? I could actually see it replacing a lot of day-to-day activities, as I mentioned earlier, make it more efficient. I think that's a plus.
And maybe it's just because I purchased our first home about 2 years ago. So around this time, a little bit before this time, but a little over 2 years ago, I was going through the mortgage process, and it was hectic. And I thought they did, the bank I worked with did a really good job about automating as much as possible, but I could see that being a great opportunity to streamline it. And some already are in some ways, but I think if you could streamline that document collection process down to the signing, I think one of the most painful things I had to do, which was, it was fun because for my wife and I, it was, say we're signing our documents, we had to put wet signatures in all of our loan documents. My gosh, I did everything you DocuSign up to the very end, and now I'm signing 183 pages, doing 25 or 28 wet signatures and initials and everything else. And I think there could be opportunity to apply there in some way, just to make that process that much more streamlined. Why does it have to be 3 days before you're going to close? Like, there's got to be a way to add AI in there to say, well, why can't we make this a little bit more conducive?
Yeah. And by the way, Matt, sorry to interrupt, but exactly, if you had something doing a counter legal review as well, because I kind of laughed to myself. I almost have zero idea what I'm saying.
That's wouldn't it be nice to get somebody advises on your behalf versus the really, especially if you think about the marginalized populations that have struggled to get lending over time, right? This might be the first time. It was my first time signing all that type of stuff, but I can only imagine that's got to apply for other areas. And I'd been in auto lending for years, so I was pretty familiar with an auto lending contract. But gosh, mortgage was a whole different world. I think there's an opportunity from there. You mentioned Google Map. That one that caught my ear, where you think, what if you could take that? You went the wrong way, and it tells you where to go to get back to where you really want to go, type of thing. What direction to go? There's got to be such a great opportunity with that from how you enable and you make lending more inclusive and equitable for those populations that need that, to kind of coach them along the way. I'm pretty good I'm pretty financially savvy because I've worked for banks in the past. I can understand how to get the best rate and get the best account, and shop my CDs and my high yield accounts, all that kind of stuff. I don't know that people know how to do that. And they're going to depend on an aggregator that's probably getting paid for that. What if you had a tool that would help those folks find the best thing for them? Even internal. So you bank with a bank, and they know you're going to have about 20 grand in your bank account. Well, heck, you always are carrying this 20 grand. What if we put that in a CD for you 3 months and get you 3% instead of leaving it sit there getting 0.2%? Those are always just enable and make, I think, banking more fair for a wider population. Obviously, there's a profitability piece to that, because why pay you 3 when they can pay you 0.2? But I think it would go a long way with folks saying you're making the banking process more inclusive, equitable for everybody who's involved.
I know that we are only scratching the surface on this topic, and before we wrap up, we have an exciting announcement for our listeners. GDS Link, in collaboration with our partners at Equifax, will be hosting a webinar, Ride the Alt Data Wave or Get Swept Away, How Alternative Data and Custom Decisioning Solutions Are Revolutionizing Lending. This insightful discussion will take place on Thursday, June 22nd. We invite everyone listening to register for the webinar by visiting the link provided in our show notes. It's an excellent opportunity to delve deeper into the topic we've been exploring today. This is Matt Tepper, and I've been seeking up with Carl Spilker, Executive Vice President of Global Analytics and Advisory at GDS Link, and Matt Shubert, Vice President of Predictive Analytics and Data Science at West Coast University. Thanks for tuning in and learning more about AI and its impact on the future of lending. If you would like to learn more about the work Matt and his team are working on, visit westcoastuniversity.edu. Stay connected with GDS Link and the Lending Link to listen to future podcasts and catch up on the ones you missed. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast. And be sure to leave us a 5-star review. Follow us on LinkedIn and connect with us on Twitter at GDS Link. That's at GDSLINK on Twitter. Have a question for the show or a specific topic you want us to cover? Hit the link in the description to drop us a note. Again, want to thank both Carl and Matt for their time today, and want to thank you all for lending us part of your day. Make it a great one.